Okay, so this is a quick, brief introduction into student housing in Altoona. So if you're a real estate professional, investor, or somebody that wants to rent to students, this is a quick little primer on student housing. Give you a couple of tips on how to find out if your house will qualify, and give you a couple of tips on how to get a house qualified. This information is just for informational purposes only, not to be construed as legal advice. If you need legal advice, please consult your attorney. This is just an explainer. So just going to go through a couple of quick things. First of all, you're going to want to get access to the Altoona PA.gov website. And so as part of this, you can see on the screen, there is a website here, altoonapa.gov, and you're going to want to go over to the left-hand side. There is a spot actually on the left-hand side that actually has, we'll just have to bring this up here. I have to swap to the correct screen here so I can navigate it. So on the City of Altoona website, there is a registered student homes choice. So you pick the registered student homes choice. And once you make that selection, it brings up a map. Now, this is probably one of the most important parts of the map. The city city border ends here. There are some navigation tools. If you move down to the right-hand side of the screen, you can hit the plus. This is, by the way, a PDF you can download. You don't have to navigate it on the altoonapa.gov website, but to get the most recent, up-to-date version, it's a good idea to go ahead and go to the website, and you can actually just do this live like I'm doing. Now, one of the things that you notice is the border, the Altoona campus of Penn State, the main part of the campus is here. Now, in the last couple of years, the campus has built some classroom space downtown Altoona. And so in response to some resident concerns in the area surrounding the Altoona campus, and as the Altoona campus has grown, a number of privateers have come in and bought up local housing and have rented them to students. So a number of years ago, City of Altoona passed a student housing ordinance that was largely based on the ordinance that State College uses for their student housing. So if I got the colors right, the orange little markers, everything in orange, there's orange and it looks like a pink or a reddish color, indicate student housing in student housing areas. Now, as you notice, right near the campus here on Ivy Side and 25th Avenue, there's lots and lots of student housing lined up. So what the city did, based on the density of the zoning, and I'm not going to get into all those rules, but the easy way to remember this is a student house is marked. So if you look at this pink one here, this little marker here is a house, and this around it is known as the zone buffer. So the zone buffer means that if you want to try to establish new student housing, you can't put a house anywhere in that zone buffer. And so if you notice near the campus, all of these really overlap because there's so many of them. And the reason they overlap is because this is what's known as grandfathered student housing. And to understand grandfathering, you have to understand zoning ordinances. Essentially, the city rezoned the entire city and made student housing, I called it outlawed. They didn't like that terminology, but essentially, you cannot rent to to students if you don't get your house rezoned. So essentially, if your house is not currently grandfathered as a student house, you would have to get a zoning variance in order to be able to use your house or a house you purchased for student housing. So, and we'll talk about that process in just a second. So here near the campus, you see all these little orange markers, and you see the, let's zoom in a little further. We're going to really zoom in here, and you can, this will help you see the zone buffers a little bit, and I'll recenter the screen. Okay, so what you can see, and this is Juniata, so you can see it's all populated. So the orange is grandfathered student housing, and the red or the pinkish color is newly adopted student housing. I have the distinction of having the first house ever approved for student housing under the new ordinance. So these houses, you know, boom, 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 those houses are all student housing. They overlap one another. You cannot put a student house anywhere in the shaded area. So if you wanted to put a house, student house, you could buy a house here on Elm Street, for example, and go through the process of getting it approved for a student house. Just because it's not covered by the zone buffer doesn't mean you're going to get it approved. You have to go to planning. You get the materials you need to make an application and get apply for a zoning variance and go to a hearing panel to have your house approved. So again, these are the grandfathered student houses. So if you're speculating and you want to purchase a home, and you look at one of the homes down here on Broadway, these would be eligible, but with conditions. So let's talk about some of those conditions. And I'm not going to pull up the ordinance and go through it, but I can tell you that if you want to rent student housing, there's square footage requirements. Each house has to have a certain amount of square feet per student, which limits the number of students that you can have. So some of these grandfathered student houses could have up to 4 students living in a home. Keeping in mind there's an overriding city ordinance that says no more than 4 non-related people can live in a home together. And that's across all categories, not just student houses. And then the other piece is if you don't have enough bedrooms or enough square footage, you won't be able to get it approved for. My general recommendation is that when you look at this, you're going to have a hard time, in my opinion, of getting a house approved for more than 3 students in pretty much any case. The first screening method you want to use for a student house is, can you accommodate one of the major ordinance provisions, which is you have to supply 2 off-street parking spaces with the property. So either it's got to have a garage or it's got to have a pad out back or space that you can park 2 cars off street, because one of the big issues with residents is this parking and jockeying for parking space. If you've got 4 students living in a home and they each have a car, you will obviously created a parking situation. So the first screening method is, I think, before you even look at the house, is can you accommodate the parking? If the house doesn't have two, some of these houses in Altoona are on the side street, which means that they're on 60-foot lots in many cases, you're not going to be able to get, in most cases, the 2 off-street parking space requirement met, and that's going to stop you in your tracks. So that's a couple of tips that you can use to look up whether you can get a student house. There are details, I believe, online, or you can contact an agent at Perry Wellington Realty, and we can give you more details. But that's view of the map. And then one last thing, that when the city rezoned, there was one area, and you have to look at the overall planning map to see this, but there's one area of the city that is exempt from the student housing ordinance. And we call that affectionately known as the red zone. And that might be why this house does not have a zone buffer around it. The red zone does not require, you do not have to have a variance in the red zone. And the red zone is basically downtown. So you can put housing in downtown Altoona according to the ordinance. And again, this is me reading the ordinance, not legal advice. It's not a guarantee. But you in the red zone, and you can pull that up off of the city map. If you look at the planning map, we can go to planning, and I think there's a map under planning. If I can find it for you, there's a little more student resident detail here. But if you go to the planning, maybe it's under city departments. You go to the planning and community development area. There is I believe there is a planning department map. Yeah, there's permits, planning department permits, functions, reports. It's in here somewhere. Out to the zoning map. Here it is. So if you look at the zoning map, this is another PDF, and you'll see the red zone here. I'll scroll down. There you go. There's the red zone. So the red zone is essentially, if I recall correctly, this is the area where student housing, you can put student houses in without a variance in the city. So it's incorrect to say the city outlawed it in the whole city. They segmented one area, which is the downtown area, that you can put student housing in. But as you can see, all of the areas back near the campus are essentially back in here, the Altoona campus here. These are, really single family, light or medium density residential. And there's a little key on the map too, if you want to look at that. That's a nice thing to be able to see. It's suburban, single household, limited, mixed. And then the red zone is basically central business area. So hope that gives you some help. This is Adam Conrad with Perry Wellington Realty, just giving you a quick explainer on variances, zoning, student housing, and the student housing ordinance. Hope this helps.